The following podcast may contain adult language and conversations revolving around situations not suitable for immature audiences. Spoilers and general political incorrectness can often be expected, so listener discretion is advised.
They must be destroyed on sight!
Hold up. Jeez, calm down, everyone.
Oh, all right, we're back. Paul's rambling about nonsense and...
Nonsensical rambling.
Yeah, and we're back. There's another episode of They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, a movie podcast, and I'm joined by my faithful co-hosts, Daniel Harper and Paul Romali. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. Lee, the floating head.
I'm floating head tonight.
Yeah, I don't know how faithful I am, but sure, go ahead. Yeah, we're good.
You've never cheated on me, baby. Come on now.
It's always with consent, so we're good.
It is, yes. So this is going to be the first episode of our sort of initial jumping into Italian horror directors. It's going to be all month in October. And then, of course, I'm just going to make it a series, so we can always go back to it at some point. And I think definitely with this episode, we want to go back to some other films with this director at some point because, on reflection, perhaps some of the choices are not probably the best introductions to this director, but we'll get more into that as we review the movies. Oh, yeah, we're going to be doing Lucio Fulci tonight, and we picked two films from his extensive fucking filmography. He has over 50 films. And we're going to be doing Host by the Cemetery and A Cat in the Brain. But before then, if any of you guys have anything you've watched in the last little while, and if you want to talk about it, now's your chance. I know Paul has watched a couple things, so if you want to talk about those.
Yeah, I fast-forwarded through a couple things. I watched the H.P. Lovecraft The Tomb, and I can't tell you who made it or what. You know, I didn't really get into the specifics of the movie. All I know is they took the basic idea of a few films that they heard about once, put it like Pickman's Model, Case of Charles Dexter Ward. They put like random drops in the film, made The Tomb, which would have been an epic movie for either Full Moon or like Hammer Horror to do, and completely changed it, made it into like this weird slasher corpses talking to themselves, but you know what's going to happen at the end. It just kind of ruined the whole movie for me. And I say this as a Tomb fanatic. I like the movie Tomb. I think the story Tomb would be a very great film, but this one, not so much. And I don't know about you guys, but there's a certain style of filming. Back in the day, it was VHS filming. If you saw a film shot on VHS, it was usually shit kittens. And that's whatever they're shooting on now with digital cameras, it looks like shit. So
I totally agree. I hate fucking digital film.
Yes, please stop doing that. If you're gonna, I know film costs money, but if you're gonna do something, make sure you spend the money and do it right.
Well, here's the thing. People aren't really making celluloid anymore. They're not doing it. I mean, digital film, unfortunately, is the future of the film industry. It really is. I mean, now to buy celluloid, especially if you want to get like a specialized certain format of celluloid, like if you want to get like a certain like 70 millimeter or something like that, you got to pay out the fucking yin yang to get it at this point.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous, and there is definitely a difference. Like you look at a film, like a classic film shot on like 35 millimeter or something like that, you compare it to a digital video, it's night and day. And honestly, watching a lot of digital film, like some people manage to do it right and make it look good, but for the most part, a lot of those films, they just take me out of it. Like, I don't feel like I'm watching a film anymore. I feel like I'm just watching something that's staged and looks fake to me. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I don't know. It might just be my personal experience with it, but I really don't like digital film for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's the sense of disbelief. You don't get that very much with that because you're so stuck outside of the film, you can't get into it as easy. I mean, the same thing went back in the day with the straight to VHS copies too. I mean, I just couldn't watch them and get into them as easy as regular films. But I watched that, which give it a go. Let me know what you think. I mean, I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. It's easy. But the other one I watched, which was a little bit better, stupid special effects now and again, they kind of to help bump up the bad guys a little bit. But I watched Medium Raw, which is a serial killer / cannibal film with a edge of a werewolf note to it, because the one guy literally dresses up as a giant mechanical wolf. So it's pretty interesting. Like it has like this built metal armor, that kind of thing. Pretty easy film plot, and you can basically the guy's the main protagonist in the film. His sister was murdered by this beast when he was young, and she was young as well. And then basically he's tracking the killer down the rest for another 15 years. The story takes place basically in this giant colony cannibal underground jail. So basically the whole film takes place in this giant jail, where you start to get the backstory on all the cannibals that are in the jail and all the maximum security reasons, and the psychiatric professor that runs it. So if you've seen a movie based in the woods with a psychiatric colony of werewolves howling, you know what's going on. You kind of know what's going on. So you know the plot twist. I mean, you can kind of figure it out. But it's not a bad movie. Give it a go. Check it out, especially if you like more like shoot 'em up crime stuff with some fighting and whatnot. So give it a go.
Interesting. Is there anything you saw, Daniel, or not?
Nothing in particular that I can talk about here. No movies. I've been, just watching the two that we had to watch for this. It was kind of all the time I had.
Yeah. And any thoughts on digital versus celluloid?
Honestly, you put your finger on it yourself. I mean, digital is the way, not of the future. It is the way of the present. I mean, celluloid has kind of gone away. In 10 or 15 years, the only way you're going to see a film made on celluloid is if it is some, artisanal product of, it's commercial filmmaking just isn't made that way anymore. I think that part of the reason, I haven't seen the film that Paul was talking about, so I can't speak to it, but I think a lot of the thing is cinematographers are still, or directors of photography are still learning how to adapt to digital. Mm-hmm. And still figuring out how to shoot stuff to make it look good, especially on low budget, low light conditions, for instance, like doing film noir and that sort of thing, tends to look really shitty, or it tends to look digital as opposed to film. Mm-hmm. One of the things with digital is just that it's higher resolution than film. Film, it looks quote unquote like film, but it's actually lower fidelity than the digital image. So digital images tend to look like soap operas because they're shot on videotape.
Yeah.
Again, higher resolution.
Are we the ones that were talking about the back in the day when we watched the VHS version of a film, and we were blown away, and then you watch the new remastered HD version of the film, you're like, well, that looks horrible.
We actually talked about that last week with the Terminator in brief. How the effects don't look as good on the DVD version compared to the VHS copies.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all in kind of how it was designed to look. Ultimately, I think that it can be done. It's just a new technology. It's still, even though it's 15 years old now, it's still relatively new in terms of how people are using it and that sort of thing. But I think that ultimately, if you look at, for instance, if you look at the indie revolution, quote unquote, of the mid '90s, you look at the work that Kevin Smith had to do to make Clerks and spent $30,000. That movie can be made for just a couple of grand these days because you don't have to buy film, and so it really opens up the market to low budget independent filmmakers if they know what to do, if they can actually do good quality cinematography. I think they're both just tools. It's just how you use it. That's kind of the bottom line.
Yeah, it really does, and I feel like the technology will eventually get to the point where you won't notice the difference anymore because it's digital and you can actually manipulate it to make it look like old film. You look at what Robert Rodriguez is doing with he did on Grindhouse and stuff like that, where he basically made. He shoots all of his shit in digital, and he made his part of the Grindhouse feature basically look like a VHS movie, essentially. So, it can be done. At this point, people go, oh, it feels artificial, he's just a hipster or whatever. I feel like in maybe 10 or 15 years, that won't be the case anymore. People will just accept it, and it'll be that good. At the same time, I'm not for that. I honestly, I still really do sort of love the purity of celluloid, but, I have to acknowledge that I'm not going to see a lot of celluloid film in the coming years.
You know that. You already know. You're self-aware of the fact that it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just too expensive. I mean, it's bottom line. It's too expensive.
We're in the film industry point now where, now this is a cross-reference, but black metal and stuff was back in 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The technology was there where you could get it and put it on your own computer. You didn't have to go anyplace. You didn't have to spend a lot of money. And the quote was, any dickhead in his bedroom with a guitar and microphone could make a black metal album. You didn't need it, and they didn't make a lot of good ones. Let's just say that. You know what I mean? It was easier, and now we're at the point now anyone with a camera thinks they can make a fucking movie, and sometimes it doesn't work out so good. And sometimes you get the Justin Van Biebers or the Jim Van Biebers. You get the ones that really do really great independent films, and then you get a lot of shit.
Well, that's the thing. It opens up the doors for independent people to actually make a quality film and get it seen by people. I think that's probably the best thing about it, because it's no longer the studios dominating everything. Now the studios are forced to have to try to buy these things from independents. So I think to a degree it is a good thing. It opens the doors for creativity at the very least. So. And
the internet is there to push people's work out for the masses to see, which is nice too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just piggybacking very briefly on what you said, Lee. I mean, it is like Paul, excuse me, the explosion in terms of like lowering the barrier to entry does mean more people do it, and then you get a lot of crap that comes out of that. Mm-hmm. But you can get good shit that comes out of it. It's just that previously the only people that could afford to do it were people who had, who were super passionate and who had spent the $20,000 or whatever to actually make it happen.
Yeah, so, I think the last generation was like Kevin Smith maxing out his fucking credit cards for that shit.
Absolutely. And today he wouldn't have to,
No.
And how many kind of second-rate? I mean, how many people who might have been Kevin Smith given another couple of films under their belt, or Quentin Tarantino or Robert Rodriguez, who made something that wasn't very good? They spent all their cash on it, and then it just kind of disappeared. Whereas if they'd spent $500 or $5,000 instead of $50,000, and then could have come back from that and then made another film and another film, how many of those people could have then gone on to better careers? So
yeah, and they all have now. They have the social media platforms that none of the people in the '90s had. I mean, there's been like basically a sea change as far as being able to promote your film at this point. So
yeah, we're not that bitter old men. We just have a hard time accepting some things. We get there. We get there
pretty much. Yeah. Okay, so I think we have no comments or anything like that. So I think we can get.
Damn you, Greg.
Yeah, Greg didn't go.
He didn't listen to the episode in the last 2 days and post an 800-word comment.
No, but I must say we are doing this episode in sort of short notice, and by the way, I appreciate the fact that both of you were able to take the time to show up earlier in the week and record with me, so I appreciate that, by the way. But
I'm doing this instead of getting laid, by the way, so you should appreciate that.
I definitely appreciate that. Awesome. We're going to start off our initial little jump into the Italian horror directors sort of series. We're going to be talking about Lucio Fulci, and he was born in 1927, died in 1996. He's best known as sort of like I think the moniker most people give him is sort of the Godfather of Gore as far as Italian directors go. He directed more than 50 films in his career. He started out in the 1960s. Actually 1959, but in the 1960s he's directed about 18 different Italian sort of comedy films early in his career. A lot of them are just like unknown films at this point that no one's ever fucking seen. In 1969 he moved on to the thriller arena, and he did A Lizard in Woman's Skin. He did a couple other films. He did 4 for the Of the Apocalypse, which is sort of a mix of horror and spaghetti western. His really first international breakthrough, although, was Zombie 2 in the European markets, which was sort of marketed as a successor to Dawn of the Dead, which was a big breakthrough in the Italian film market when it essentially showed there. Dario Argento, of course, was producing it for the European market. His biggest period of success was from about 1979 to 81 or 82, where he had a series of films come out. He had City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, The House by the Cemetery, which we are covering tonight, The Black Cat, New York Ripper, and Manhattan Baby. That was all between 1980 and 1982. Before that, of course, I said Zombie was like his big sort of jump into his success. He's probably notable for being very heavily censored in North American markets and also in British markets. He was featured on the sort of video nasties kind of list for quite a while.
This film was on it that we're going to do.
Yeah, and he kind of died off after that, sadly enough. He had a lot of health problems. His career sort of tapered off because of his health problems. He tried to revive it a little bit in the 90s to moderate success or just basically no success at all. One of the few heartwarming things about him is that he showed up at a horror film convention in the 90s and had a multitude of people basically trying to get his autograph and talk to him. He had actually no idea that he was so well loved in the North American horror market. So that's a nice little capping off of his career. At the very least, he really did have a lot of bad health problems. So he had diabetes and several other health problems. So it kind of hampered his career to a certain degree. And also he was in the sort of decline of the Italian film market. It sort of peaked around 1985 or so, and after that it was sort of diminishing returns for just about every Italian exploitation director. They just didn't catch up with what Hollywood was doing, even though they were imitating Hollywood. And I think we'll probably get more into that when we review the films. Yeah, I think we're going to start with... What did I tell you, Daniel, that we were going to start with? Because I know
House by the Cemetery?
The House by the Cemetery, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we will start with House by the Cemetery.
Oh, have you been to see Mrs. Peterson?
What do you say to a widow who finds out her husband butchered his mistress and then took his own life?
That's where Peterson hanged himself from that iron
Take me away from here. I can't stand it anymore. Take me away.
Bob, I'm here behind you. You've come. However, I told you very clearly.
I tried, but my mother wouldn't listen. She said Daddy had to do some research here.
You shouldn't have come, Bob. You shouldn't have.
Opinion, why would a man like him slaughter the woman he loved and then hang himself?
Well, I don't know. Human mind.
Yeah, a research project on suicide where the researcher commits suicide.
Don't go inside, whoever you are. Don't go inside.
Someone's in here, Mommy! There's someone down there! Get the door open!
Where's the axe? Where's the axe? Bob, keep away from the door.
No, I will.
Don't worry, Bobby. I'll get you out.
Why? Who's there? Who's in this house?
Dr. Freudstein.
Bob!
You should have listened to what I said.
1981, also known as Zombie Hell House, and of course directed by Fulci, written by Eliza Brigante. Lucio Fulci also added to this. They credit H.P. Lovecraft as inspiration for this film, and Giogoro Mazzuro. Just so everyone knows, while we're doing this Italian series, I'm going to totally butcher most of the fucking names we come up with.
Moro, Zorro, Godate.
Yeah.
Lee just says, yeah, it's a random string of vowels. Like, let's just get on with it.
Pretty much.
Guido, cannoli.
And also Dardano Cerecchetti. What
this is the best part of the show so far.
Not to say their names than it is to butcher them this way, Lee.
This guy, that guy, this guy, that girl, this guy. Okay, let's do it.
I'm crediting someone at least some alternate universe where their name makes sense. So it's starring Katerina McCall as Lucy Boyle, Paolo Marco as Dr. Norman Boyle, Ania Peroni as Anne, Giovanni Frazetta as Bob. Oh God, Bob. Fuck Bob. Sylvia Colatina as May. Dagmar Lassender as Laura, and Giovanni Di Nava as Dr. Freudenstein. Yeah, I gotta get that right.
Freudstein.
Do any of you want to try to tackle the synopsis for the plot of this film, by any chance? Paul?
Somebody saw The Shining and the Amityville Horror and decided, let's do that, but in Italian and then dub it? Isn't that kind of the plot?
That sounds pretty close, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sort of involves a I can't even really tell what Dr. Norman Boyle's doctorate is in. I can't quite remember. I think it's like psychiatry or something like that. But him and his family essentially go to this house that is instantly it's basically a haunted house to some degree. He's taking his family there to take up the work of his contemporary who apparently had killed his girlfriend and hung himself in the house. He was doing studies on suicide, apparently. They get to the house, and a lot of weird shit starts happening. Their son, Bob, basically is having these encounters with a sort of ghostly girl and her mother. They're trying to warn Bob and the rest of the family about the menace that lives in the basement of the house. And that is essentially the plot of the film. I just want to sort of start by saying, before anyone gets into the thoughts of this film, Lucio Fulci is not big on plot, especially when he
never makes sense. That's the point.
Yeah, when he gets to his horror films, especially, a lot of his earlier films actually make sense. They actually do. But once he gets to his horror period, a lot of his stuff is very nonsensical. It does not fit the conventions of standard plot. You have to go into it understanding that he's much more about mood, set pieces, and sort of a dream-like kind of narrative to his films, as opposed to a typical narrative that you can actually follow and understand. So I think I'll go to Daniel first, because part of this series is to try to get Daniel sort of indoctrinated into Italian filmmaking, and honestly, this is probably one of the weirder fucking Fulci films, so I'm actually really interested in hearing what he'll have to say about it.
I want to see the guy that thinks he kind of knows exactly what Fulci's trying to do, then watch him watch Manhattan, baby, and go, I don't fucking know. I just don't know.
Yeah. But we'll go to you, Daniel, first. What are your sort of initial thoughts on this film?
I will say I had seen Zombie before watching this. I have seen Zombie, which I guess I just didn't realize was a Fulci film. I knew it was Argento, but I didn't realize it was Fulci. So yay, I've seen a Fulci film before now. I like Zombie, actually. It's good. I mean, now that you say that, I'm like, well, obviously it fits in that same style. Whereby there's virtually nothing really going on thematically or interestingly, except for it kind of rips off some other movies and then has some really cool gore scenes that don't look remotely realistic but look cool nonetheless. And that's kind of the point. Structurally, it reminds me a little bit of Audition, the Miike film, which basically exists of okay, so we're gonna make you sit through 90 minutes of kind of nothing much going on, and then give you some really freaky shit at the end that makes you leave the theater happy. And that's, I think, what this movie definitely does. It borrows structurally from, again, the Amityville Horror and The Shining. The supernatural elements I thought were pretty well handled in terms of, it is kind of legitimately creepy. But this movie really could have been about 25 minutes long, and that's, I just kind of, the first, hour or so, I don't care. I lost track of any semblance of plot, any semblance of who these people were. I'm just kind of letting it wash over me and just enjoying the mood, open a beer, and then once you get to the end, it's kind of like, oh, now I kind of get why I sat through all this. But really, I didn't have to. I could have just started at 60 minutes, and it would have been fine. But
yeah. Right on. Paul, what's your sort of initial thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this is the first Fulci film I ever saw. So it's my indoctrination to Fulci when I first started watching the film genres. I like the film. There's definitely a house, and there's definitely a cemetery. So don't worry about that, guys.
There's a bat. I like the bat.
I like the bat that bleeds from every orifice and has a gallon of blood in it when you stab it. So I want to find bats like that, and I want to stab them and make a lot of mess.
But it supernatural. It looks great when it's flapping around, though. It doesn't look like one of those hammer bats.
No, there's a little bit of a rubberiness to the wings that make it actually look like it's real, bat flesh. It's pretty interesting.
I kept expecting the guy to stab through his own hand.
I thought, he looked at the scissors am I going to do this? Yeah, fuck it.
If I'm sitting there and I've got a bat clawing at me and I'm in my kitchen, I drown the fucker. That's sort of my goal. Instead of risking stabbing through my own hand.
If you've got a bat the size of a fucking fruit bat on your fucking hand, you're smashing that in every fucking wall you fucking run into.
Exactly. I wouldn't. You're right. But you don't grab a pair of scissors and decide I'm gonna stab through it.
You don't wait 3 minutes and decide, okay, I'm gonna stab it now.
You go all Ash from Evil Dead 2 and chop off your own hand with a chainsaw.
Exactly. Yeah.
I actually knew a guy who looked a lot like the male protagonist of this film.
Yeah.
I kept getting distracted because I knew a guy who looked almost exactly like that, and I kept being well, Jonathan would never have done that.
You never would have done that. He never would have gone in the basement and tried to fucking hatchet fucking Dr. Freudenstein in the face.
With that tiny little hatchet, we're gonna slice through this door with a tiny hatchet. Yay!
I almost want to say that's the same hatchet that appears in Cat in the Brain later. That is as sharp as any hatchet in the world.
Could have been.
Anything
else initially?
Can I give it a moment of praise? Go
ahead.
I did like the putting the child in danger.
Yeah,
I liked the slicing through the door with the child right by the thing. I thought that was an effective scene because I think at this point, you're usually when you're watching any kind of film, you're well, they're never going to hurt the kid. But I think, in these, I think the point of the genre is well, they might actually slice the kid's head off,
And he actually did get sliced in the face, the blade cut him the side of the cheek, and that is a motif, and this is a film we'll eventually do, hosted by the City of the Living Dead. That is a motif that Fulci had. Which enacts basically coming through wood close to a person's face. He effectively does it there. Of course, that definitely is a take on The Shining in that scene, definitely. Overall, I actually do like this film a lot. I will admit totally that this is the lesser of his sort of trilogy of better-known films. Mm-hmm. This is sort of considered part of his Death trilogy, which also includes City of the Living Dead and the Beyond. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this was and basically he made all those movies within the span of about a year and a half or so. And this is definitely a lesser of those films. It's much more scatterbrained as far as plot goes to a certain degree. If you're a newbie going into Fulci, it's definitely a bit more confusing. But if you've had a lot of Fulci films under your belt, you kind of realize what he's going for with his horror films, where he's not really.
I'm gonna say I wasn't confused because I didn't pay enough attention to be confused. Maybe it was a little just oh, there's this guy on the screen with the beard, and then there's the lady, okay, and then there's the ghost who's trying to help the little girl, and there's the boy, and I would have gotten just as much out of it watching it on mute. Honestly, that was the level of detail I got into the plot of the film.
I mean, he does not center on plot a lot. I mean, if you look at this film, all the characters basically make no sense. I mean, like the husband and wife, they're having problems. The wife is incredibly stupid. I mean, she, like the babysitter character, who knows
I
why
was going to mention her. There is some subtle red herrings in here that just randomly make no sense. She's probably the most evil person in the whole movie that has nothing to do with the actual plot, even though she cleans up blood and doesn't mention it.
Yeah, it's like you never really know why she's in the movie. Like there's a hint that, like, there's foreshadowing in the movie. The movie starts out trying to confuse you to what the little red-haired girl is. Like, is she a ghost? Is she a psychic? Is she, communicating with Bob? By the way, who the fuck calls their kid Bob? Who calls their child Bob? Your kid is called Robert or
Bobby
or Bobby or something like that. No one calls their kid Bob until he's 45.
Whose kid really has a voice like an adult man doing a vaguely childlike voice, though?
I'm not sure if this is the same deal, but a lot of Italian movies were actually filmed with no sound.
Yeah.
Because there were so many films going on at the same time in the area that they just did without sound, and then because it was such a hustle and bustle loud thing, you could never shut everybody up at the time, so then they just overdub anything. But he does sound like a 20-year-old, which is pretty
that was indicative of the film industry in Italy even right up into the 2000s. I think they even still do it today to some degree. That was in part because the Italian film industry was in the war. Was devastated. Like, they just didn't have sound stages and shit after the war, and the couple sound stages they did have weren't necessarily the greatest. But yeah, it was just sort of tradition that you dub the sound afterwards.
Maybe this kid was that kid from that Ray Bradbury story where he's like this immortal who's like 10 years old, kind of like.
Yeah.
I'll just say right now, I hated Bob. I wish he had been killed in the film.
I've hated him every time I've seen him.
I'm just going to put that out there because
he's like this amalgam of Haley Joel Osment and Anakin Skywalker.
And it also didn't help that the sort of Italian translation kind of doesn't work in English to some degree, because it's like when he gets to the town, the kid gets to the town with his family, and he again sees May, the little girl. She says, "Hey, Bob, I'm here. Look across the street." And then he goes, "Hi, I'm Bob." It's like, May's like, "Yeah, I know. You're Bob. I've been talking to you for, like, the beginning of the fucking movie saying your fucking name, you little asshole." It's like, wow. That ghost has a lot of patience. I just got to put it right there.
Well, she's got nothing better to do.
I do like this film quite a bit just for its style and its mood. If you're going into it for plot or anything that makes sense with the characters, like we said, the babysitter character, I don't know where the fuck she comes from. I don't know what she's supposed to be in the film. I don't know what significance she has other than to end up dying at the end of the film. Other than that, it's like, is she supposed to have had an affair with the husband? Because I think they kind of apply that once in a while in the film, but they never really pay it off.
Yeah.
Because there's this implication that the husband has been to the town before without his family and has been doing the research and stuff on. And I'll just say, the plot is essentially centered around this Dr. Freudstein, who has been doing experiments. He's been alive since the Victorian era and living in the basement of his house, basically using the blood cells of his victims to sort of re-energize his own blood cells and keep them alive.
We know where Del Toro got it for Hellboy, really. Like, that was the it's the same idea,
Yeah, if you look, it almost seems like, because they focus right at the beginning of the film with the two lovers, and then she dies. They focus in on the hand. You see the ring later, and then you see her almost effeminate hand as his hand later. If you look, because he's got one good hand. There's a tomb in the living room the wife finds, and this is a psychology, haunted house, serial killer film all mixed up into one. It's an amalgamation of different things. The line I always thought was funny goes, "Oh, that's normal around here. When it gets cold in the winter, the ground's hard as a rock, so they just bury people in houses." I'm like, really? I didn't know that. I live in America.
It just sounds like bullshit, but
yeah. And if you go down to the basement, which obviously they've been down there at some point in time without getting killed, if you look up, you see the tomb. You see it. It's like right there. Obviously, it's not a tomb. It's just a plaque in the wall, in the floor. There's a couple things that I know. There's been a few cuts to the film. Depending on what version you watch, there's up to like 18 minutes or something of the film cut out from the original. The caretaker that passes away in the middle of the room after she gets stuck into the tomb crack, I guess.
Yeah, the real estate agent. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a large section of her death cut out because after he stabs her, then he mutilates her face and pulls out her eyeball, and you see the continuity error when he drags the body later. You see half of her face completely mangled where it wasn't initially. The gore effects in the films are pretty good. The Dr. Freudstein himself is a very odd take on a mummified person, but the stuff that comes out of him when he's stabbed, I always like that. I do appreciate the rotten guts and maggots. Fulci never seems to let me down in that aspect.
I like the bukkake, the blood bukkake coming from the lady's windpipe. You know.
I think we'll talk on that for a second. I mean, since this is our sort of introduction to Fulci for this podcast, at least, I'll just mention that one of the biggest motifs for him is when he does his gore stuff, he just goes absolutely overboard insane, where there's like much more blood and destruction to the body than would be possible at all.
Just look at the bat.
He stabs the bat in one place, and then like blood starts leaking out of like 5 different holes.
Out of everywhere. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you point out a good continuity error there. Like that was a scene that wasn't even shown in any version of the film where she gets her eye torn out. Like that was just totally cut and destroyed.
Yeah. Fulci didn't like the effect of it, so it was just destroyed.
You look at his like whenever he does gore scenes in the film, he uses sound. He uses noises that you would never hear when someone's being stabbed or killed or whatever. Yeah. Like, a person's throat gets crushed and it's like...
Yeah. You just twist the celery around a little bit. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, like
and you can like decapitate or like stick just take like a cane and just stick it right into somebody's body and just like as if people's flesh is made out of Play-Doh. Like that's
pretty much.
Sort of. The Italian people's flesh is made of Play-Doh.
Well, it's really like a deep metaphor about how we are all made of clay, really, and so we are not of godlike essence. We are all of earth. It's really this deep metaphor in Fulci's films, I think.
Yeah, good call.
The only actual thing,
and that's ultimately why they are vulnerable to this supernatural being, because they are sinful and not made of the thing of the gods.
They're made out of clay, and Dr. Freudstein's made of fucking SpaghettiOs and made of
SpaghettiOs with meatballs. Sauce.
Yeah, because when you stab him initially, like when he at the end of the film where the husband stabs him. It basically looks like fucking spaghetti and meatballs coming out.
I was thinking like beef stroganoff.
Yeah, exactly. And then it moves to the maggots. So all of a sudden the maggots are coming after.
And then the maggots come out, so it's like, I had some beef stroganoff, I cooked it, I left it out for like a month, and then like, oh look, maggots all over.
Yeah, that fills our maggot budget for this film.
The only thing that's a little odd on this one is, I guess, because I guess this is supposed to be maybe not the easiest thing to get, but the way I guess they use the name Freudstein is they play on Sigmund Freud about the childlike mentality of children and that interplay, and so you're supposed to be locked in like a child mindset. And that adds to. Then they're supposed to add that to the paranormal aspects of it. It's something that you don't get because there's a Steen on the end of it, so you don't. Oh, it must be Freud. It's all about Freud. Yeah, sure it is.
But
even when Freudstein gets injured, he cries like a baby, like a child. You can hear a child's voice the whole time.
Yeah, he makes childlike noises. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It's not, Paul. It's not that interesting, really.
Right. Yeah, this is actually my favorite Fulci movie.
Really? Wow. All right.
Wow. Okay.
The only other one I like more than this is New York Ripper.
Okay, well then this isn't your favorite Fulci movie then.
I'm sorry. The only one I like more than this.
And you know what? When we do more Fulci movies, I'm gonna have to confront you on that because I think there's way better Fulci movies in his filmography. So
I probably didn't see very many Fulci movies.
We're gonna have some future discussions, sir.
Why don't we just
Honestly,
we should all just watch Sonoma's Ghost. We all just watch Sonoma's Ghost. We'll be happy. There's Nazis. You're good.
Yeah, but I'll just throw a little bit of trivia on this one. So, of course, Fulci has a cameo as Professor Muller early on in the film. There was an early VHS issue of this film where the reels were out of order.
Yep, there was actually a misplaced reel order. So continuity, fuck that shit.
Hold on. Somebody could tell.
Yeah, no, it actually made the film more incomprehensible. It was just more confusing than it was already, which is something, that's saying something. But I do like this film. I will totally acknowledge this is not one of his best films, honestly, especially in his sort of main trilogy that people cite. This is the lesser of those films. It is much more sort of, the narrative is just totally out the fucking window, and it's much more dream logic than anything else.
Yeah.
I think the ending sort of plays to that, definitely.
Yeah. The kid doesn't live. He's just locked in his own brain by the end of it. And
yeah.
But you have to read into it. If you don't read it, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't help that like a lot of the Italian dubbing and stuff, like the English to Italian to English apparently doesn't translate very well. So a lot of the characters sound like they're fucking idiots.
Oh, like Bobby going downstairs. Mom told me you're not dead, so you're okay. Come back.
Yeah,
you saw her head fucking roll down the stairway. So way to go on that one. The two most interesting characters in the thing, and that's not even Freudstein, is Wheatley, because he's just weird. Over in the library, that guy's just off the wall. You don't see any kind of shots of Peterson's death, which would have made it more interesting. And Anne is probably the most interesting character because she's just like evil, obviously.
Yeah.
And you don't know why. And she's the one who opened the door, so obviously something made her open the fucking door. And like, you made this movie so long without explaining anything or trying to explain stuff the wrong way. You could have put 2 minutes in to let me know why Anne is fucked up.
Yeah, it's weird because they only make one sort of like initial foreshadowing to Anne where the ghost of May sees a mannequin in the window that looks like Anne, and it gets decapitated and
so you already have a pre-sense of her death, but you don't know why she's in the story.
Yeah, so it throws a supernatural element as well with Freudstein. It almost feels like there's some sort of events being manipulated by him as well to some degree, whether it's manipulated by him or if it's just like sort of predestination of some sort.
They did make a lot of reference to her medication for some reason in the film too, like shut up.
Yeah, and take that was a weird subplot where it was like tension between the husband and wife, where she was like on medication of some sort, but they basically dropped it like halfway through the film, so it don't matter.
Yeah. At the beginning, I kind of thought this was going to go in like a Straw Dogs kind of direction. Like, it's the academic and his wife kind of sitting alone and beset from the outside. I just kept thinking of better movies. It was just a thing.
But
can I make one bit where I thought there was going to be more gore than there was?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The woman at the end when she falls down the flight of stairs and like the film makes an effort of making sure every single step. And I kept thinking it's going to be like blood.
That's great.
Like she's going to like start bleeding from the face on the way down, but no, it's like man, you had a perfect opportunity. Like,
Fulci likes to take her, put him in the films, and then treat her like shit.
Yeah.
That's what he does with her. It's great. Best cameo was the black cat that sits on the tombstone. If you look at Freudstein at the end of the movie, which is a spoiler alert, why the fuck do you put your killer on the front of your fucking album, or your cover? Please don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because, you see what Freudstein looks like when you buy the movie. You don't need to watch it. He has no eyes. Whose eyes do you keep on seeing in the fucking cellar?
Well, actually, if you do look closely, like, he's shot very much in the dark. If you look very, very closely, you do kind of see eyes come out, even in the ending scenes. Like I did, I actually rewatched it tonight before I did the podcast, and you do get like a slight little reflection on his eyes in the cellar scenes. The coolest thing is like I felt like he's a really interesting monster that isn't like really utilized to his greatest extent.
Yeah. It should have been much more about that and much more into the idea of surgery and and all this stuff, but it really wasn't. It was a strange ghost story that failed.
Yeah, I like how his mouth kind of became atrophied and just basically disappeared on his body. Like it felt like that happened because he doesn't need to eat anymore. He just like absorbs like the blood cells of his victims and puts parts of them on him to rebuild himself or whatever. And I like the way that he kind of shambled and shit. Like he's constantly decaying. He's definitely not right. Like there's no way he's ever going to be like become 100% again and become himself again. Yeah. And I thought that was like sort of cool touches, but I felt like the film never really fully utilized that. Like
the film doesn't live up to the creature design. I mean that's just
Yeah, one of the definitely references that you can kind of get from this from the H.P. Lovecraft is Cold Air, with the doctor that constantly needs to take the essence of people and stuff and stay in the cold environment to stay alive. And if you've done, he just rots away like that. So, I mean, there's a reference. There's definitely a very easy reference right there. But, obviously you have, like, the castle freaks, creeping deaths, unnameable, like, all this shit, there's horrors in the houses that kill people. So, I mean, it's easy to get those references. Overall, it's a very strange movie. You have to have a sense of it to enjoy it, like why it's like this, but at the same time, never look for answers. These films will always give you more questions than ever give you answers.
Yeah. Your final thoughts there, Dan?
I feel like I've said what I need to say. It was worth watching. I'm glad I watched it. It's got some cool effects. I did like the gore. I liked the, etc. There's nothing really going on except like, oh yeah, and then there's like some cool gore at the end. Like, I don't know. Like, that's really all I had to say about it.
Yeah.
I'm glad Paul and you and Paul get more out of it, honestly. Like, I'm almost like, oh, I should maybe go and like watch this again and maybe pay a little more attention and try to get some of the nuances from it. But then I'm like, no, I'm never gonna watch this thing again. Like,
this is one you actually might understand less the more you watch it.
I will absolutely watch more Fulci films, but I'm kind of like, I'm not gonna watch this again. It's just, I'm not gonna.
This is the one where I can understand anyone thinks it's a 5 out of 10 at best. This is the one film that has the least amount of plot that I can understand besides Manhattan Baby. That one made me so confused I shut it off. So there you go.
I mean, I'll just say this again, anyone listening to this, I mean, if you're looking for a primer into Fulci, you're listening to the wrong podcast. These are the wrong 2 movies we're going to be doing to get into Fulci.
And they gave me this list of films. They literally just gave me a list of films. So I'm just saying this for the record, for the audience. Like, I have no context for this. They just gave me a list of movies and said, watch these 2, we're recording in a few days. Okay, sure, no problem. And so I just, I look it up, I find a source for it, I look it up, I hit play, I know nothing about it, and then that's my experience of watching the film. Mm-hmm. Like, so there's, he's saying, oh, no, this isn't your primer. This is how we gave it to Daniel. Like, that's fine, We're good.
just to level with you, Dan, we're kind of fucking with you on this one.
Okay, that's fair. I'm completely down with that. I completely understand.
You need a bad taste in your mouth so you can celebrate the good taste later.
Yeah,
that's fine. I get it. I'm not complaining because I did. I think I'll have more interesting things to say about the next film, honestly. So
right on.
It's called Tough One.
Yeah, I'm going to jump out for a sec for a pee break, and I'll be right back, guys.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna get another beer, so it sounds like a plan. I'll be right back.
Bam, ba, bam, bam, boom, 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 bam, ba, bam, bam, boom, 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 bam, ba, bam, bam, ba, bam, 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 ba, bam, ba, dum, bum, 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 ba, dum, bum, bum, ba, dum, bum, 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 ba, boom, ba, dum, bum, bum, ba, dum, bum, bum, ba, dum, bum, bum, ba, boom, ba, dum, bum, 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 boom, ba, dum, bum, bum, ba, dum, bum, 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 ba, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, bum, bum, ba, dum, bum, 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 Brown and now, brown and now. Ba-dum dum doo 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 boom 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 ba-dum boom boom ba-dum boom 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 ba-dum ba-dum boom boom, 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 boom. Probably this will get cut out anyway, so it really doesn't matter. Someone's coming back, I can hear them. Anybody that likes to get into the death metal idea of music, definitely check out Mortician's House by the Cemetery, which has a lot of good samples from this movie, and was one of my main introductions to this film. Mortician, they are a gore band from New York. They use a lot of samples in their movies, and because of that, I have discovered numerous amounts of films. They quote the films in them in the liner notes, so definitely go check that out. You can get the House by the Cemetery vinyl now that just got released, so definitely go check that out. This film is something that if you want continuity, don't watch the film. Basically, that's what it is. There's a lot of fun twists in it. Unfortunately, there should have been a lot more nudity and a little bit more plot structure, but overall, it's a pretty good film. That's my run on it for right now.
We're already doing the review without me? What's going on there?
I'm just doing it. You and Daniel abandoned me, so I did music with my mouth for about 3 minutes, and I started.
Okay, well, hopefully you can regurgitate everything you just said. Okay, now we're going to go into A Cat in the Brain.
Try to concentrate on the metronome. You will do everything I tell you to do.
You nearly killed a telejournalist and smashed a camera. Yeah, stick it on fire! And then you started to tear off Mrs. Herbert's clothes.
But you won't remember anything. You will slowly be possessed by madness. You'll think you've committed terrible crimes.
What's the matter with you, Fulci?
But I'll be the one who kills and wreaks the horror. Just like you do in your films.
Doesn't look real to me yet. Get him out of my sight.
I'll create an evil being who everyone will think is you. A mad, bloodthirsty monster. Your films, your scripts will condemn you as the murderer. After all, doesn't that stupid old theory say that seeing violence on the screen provokes violence? Hmm?
During the moment, that burns onto it's
from 1990, also known as Nightmare Concert. Actually, it's probably better known as Nightmare Concert in North America. Another Fulci film.
I never knew that.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised to see that. Like, I was looking for it, and I saw Nightmare Concert, like, basically just pop up everywhere when I was looking for it. So, written by Fulci, Giovanni Simonelli, and Antonio Tintori. And, of course, this is one that's actually starring Fulci as Dr. Lucio Fulci. David L. Thompson as Professor Egon Schwartz. Melissa Longo as Katya Schwartz. God damn it, your name sucks. Shillet Angel as Filippo, the producer. Jeffrey Kennedy as Inspector Gabriele Venani. And Paolo Cozo as Nurse Lily. Do you want to try to tackle the sort of synopsis for this one, Paul?
Yeah, sure. I can give it a go. Right. Of course, Cat in the Brain is actually a play on Dr. Seuss's Cat in the Hat. So that's a pretty interesting thing. And
I will not kill them on a plane. I will not kill them on a train. I will not kill them wearing Nazi uniforms.
Nope. The film is basically the idea of a man and his film career is suffering definitely traumatic ideas of the mentality where he can't shut off his brain. He always finds something horrific in life when he's looking at mundane things. He goes to a psychiatric for help who's also having relationship troubles. He's also a serial killer who uses Fulci's feeble mind at this point in time as a side plot person to blame, as a scapegoat, basically, and kind of moves Fulci around a little bit mentality-wise, kind of probing into his dark side so he can remember more bad crap, kind of following his very moves. So while he goes around following Fulci, he can kill people just to know that Fulci was there as well. So he's kind of a scapegoat. This definitely film has a lot more plot than most of his other films because there's actually a beginning, end, and middle to it. I mean, the only thing is
in that order, actually.
It's spiced. There's a spiced with Fulci goodness. The only thing is there's a lot of stock footage in this film. Yeah. But other than that, it's pretty good. Pretty good film that it's surprisingly watchable. That's a base summary of the film.
All right, Daniel, your initial thoughts on this one?
Sure. Sorry, I'm being a little bit of an asshole tonight. It happened. No, this was the first one I watched. Again, the title was there. I just looked it up. I found it, hit play, and suddenly I am engorged in a cat eating a brain, literally.
Yeah.
Some pretty intense gore. I was kind of like, oh, well, this is where Eli Roth got it from. Got it. Okay, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Eli Roth just ripped off his entire career from this movie, essentially. I'm with you.
He pimped this film. He pimped this film.
I know. I know he was on the DVD release. I did. After I watched it, I did kind of look up a little bit to kind of get some context. Or actually, once I kind of got to like, oh, it's the filmmaker, and then I went, oh, is that actually Fulci? And then so I did kind of look up a little bit as I was going through. If you are going to be introduced to a filmmaker, the best way to do that is totally to watch a clip show of his other movies with a vaguely wraparound structure. I actually liked the psychiatrist and the kind of the cop, the cat and mouse game. I thought would have been a little bit more interesting of a structure because I kind of like police procedurals. It could have been like a stray dog, a Kurosawa film. I keep thinking of better films when I'm watching this. It's just one of those things. And then with the filmmaker as kind of a secondary character, I did like some of the footage. There's some surreal kind of elements going on to certain sequences, which I think we'll get into. I do find, and even in 1990 when this film was made, I do find that the kind of the overarching structure of the is this real or is this fantasy kind of thing gets really, really tired really, really quickly. I don't think it's enough to quite motivate the whole film. But really, this is a film that's intended to kind of just deliver a bunch of the gore effects. The gore effects are good. Again, none of it looks remotely realistic. My favorite moment is when the killer has a vague general slice towards a woman's hand and cuts off her hand in the floppiest manner possible. I thought that was probably my favorite bit of the gore in the film. Lots of nudity, which, I don't know, I guess as we get on with the giallos, I'll talk a little bit more about the combination of the violence and the nudity. I think that I will have things to say, but I'd like to save that for maybe a future episode.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think this one is a better film overall than The House by the Cemetery.
Really?
I do, yeah. It held my attention a lot better. It had a lot more kind of interesting stuff. What's funny is because I watched this one first, and I'm kind of like, man, I kind of want there to be less of the kind of abstract. I want there to be kind of a more straightforward plot, like a story I can follow. And then I saw House by the Cemetery, and I went, no, the other way was better. Let's just do the abstract thing. I'm down. This is I'll just summarize it one more sentence, and I'll say this is Fellini's 8.5. If Fellini was a horror filmmaker.
Yeah, it does sort of draw from that. I mean, it's got that sort of almost sort of meta quality to it to a certain degree. This is definitely more of a love letter to Fulci's fans to a certain degree as well. Like, Fulci was trying to, like, sort of reinvigorate his career at this point. This movie, and I can't remember the other movie he was making at the time, but this was sort of to try to sort of jumpstart his career again. I don't know if it quite totally works. It takes a couple clips from, like, Fulci films that he was involved in.
A couple?
A couple. Like, some of them were films.
It's 75% of the movie.
some of the films were ones he had nothing to do with, though. Like, not ones he directed, at the very least. I mean, Il Fantasma di Sodoma, Quando Alice Rupe le Chepico, Non aver palla della zia Marta, Massacre, Bloody Psycho, and Hansel and Gretel. The original script for this was 49 pages long and contained no dialogue. Consisted basically of descriptions of bodily mutilations and imageries and sounds effects that would complement them on screen. The film was composed almost entirely in post-production, assembled from clips from Fulci's past horror films, and wraparound segments featuring Fulci were largely shot in around Rome's famous Cinecittà Studios, home of master Italian filmmaker Fellini. So it was actually done in Fellini's home, which is quite something to say. I'll say, like, I kind of enjoy this one. I feel like it's kind of almost a satire of Fellini's film, or not Fellini, Fulci's films, to a certain degree. Like, it's almost like a comment on the sort of negative criticism he got over the years, where everyone just basically outed him as, like, basically saying, "Oh, you're a sadist, you're a monster, you're a misogynist," all these different things. And he's like, okay, well, if I'm that, I'm going to put all these in a film, and I'm going to comment on them. And I mean, all the different set pieces basically sort of follow through with that, like everything from just straight on gore massacre shit to like Nazi exploitation. And overall, I actually kind of enjoy it. But I'll say this is like the first time I watched it all the way through for the podcast. I had seen bits and pieces of it here and there. I think it works fairly well, considering this is a patched together film with a lot of like stock footage. I think they implemented it pretty well for what you have on screen. I think the narrative definitely works better than a lot of Fulci films in that regard. Like, a lot of his narratives just aren't straight ahead at all. I can see why Daniel liked this one a lot more than House by the Cemetery. That's sort of where I sit on it. Any more thoughts from both of you? Definitely.
I didn't give my thoughts yet.
Well, okay. Well, there you go, Paul. Give your thoughts, motherfucker.
There you go. Definitely a good film. I like it a lot. It's fun. It's very self-aware of what it's trying to do. It knows it's being satire. It knows it's being self-stroking to Fulci a little bit. It's definitely a good stroke for Fulci, especially how he's treated as almost a super high-class star in the film, like stuff that normally gets people shot he can do, and people are like, "Yo, Mr. Fulci, what you going? What are you going?" It's really kind of funny, just chopping the shit out of red paint buckets. We're good. The reason I say, and I'll go back to what Daniel said before, the reason I say a beginning, end, and middle is because most of his films, the middle is where people go, what the fuck? This is something he actually has a middle that you can actually watch and stick with. Because of the plot, the killing, the meat, there's stuff that keeps you motivated, keeps you in the film a little bit more. Well, than The House by the Cemetery, anyway. Obviously,
there's definitely a narrative you can follow here. Sorry, not to...
Exactly.
When I made the joke of, like, in that order, it's because, like, at the end, it's like, oh, yeah, and then it turns out I was following you around the whole time. Like,
yeah.
Like, it kind of gives you that thing. It's like, I actually would have, like, kind of liked to have watched it in that order, like, police procedural side
cop
of it.
narrative at the end is more, like, added just to the end, because cops, I don't think, usually walk up and just, trench coats, jeans, and running shoes.
I was about to say, yeah, those were the worst detectives ever.
Yeah, and then just, let's throw the blanket on them and walk away. That was the end of the cop scene. So that was fun.
They're undercover, it's a thing.
Yeah.
It's
Italy, man. Come on, they're all just fucking.
Everyone drives on fucking mopeds and it goes ciao. Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at the very ending of the film, it's kind of a cheat anyway, because it's like it was all Fulci's film. In the end, essentially.
Yeah. Did you guys notice the boat perversion?
Yeah.
The boat name perversion. That's the name of one of his first thrillers. Perversion.
And there are definitely other nods to his films. Like, there's that sequence where he's walking through the mist and stuff. That's essentially like a nod to both Host by the Cemetery and The Beyond, where the endings sort of have sort of...
You actually hear the soundtrack from The Beyond playing at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Through the film, you get to see basically a good damn portion of Touch of Death. His film Touch of Death is basically the main film that you watch. And in part of it, they're actually doing pre-production for Touch of Death. They're playing it, which is also funny that the guy is watching it on film. Then the psychiatrist is watching it on his TV. I'm like, they're just filming that. How'd you do that? That's pretty cool. You get to see the black cat at the beginning eating the brains. You get to see Sonoma's Ghost, another his Nazi exploitation film. And then obviously I said already that you get to hear a lot of the Beyond soundtrack. There's another film being shot while he's walking through the mist of the woman in the tombs. I actually thought that was a better movie than some of his other films. I was like, boy, I would have liked to watch that. It was pretty goddamn cool. I love the gore effects. The psychiatrist aspect is very interesting. I like the plot of the film. It doesn't build off plot very much, but I do like it. He's very unimposing, though. I can't take him I have a hard time taking him seriously, especially with that, I don't know, the grin on his face the whole time when he's walking through as the girl. I do love the part where she's like, take my money, fuck your money, and cuts off her arm with the sharpest hatchet in the fucking world, and then just decides to go, oh, by the way, and your head's going to fall off, too, and her head just goes, wow, pretty fucking good. That guy is either the strongest man in the world or that is the best hatchet ever. So
yeah, that's the sharpest hatchet ever.
That must have been made by Ginsu or something. That is fucking great.
Yeah.
Saw through a fucking tin can with that. So the same thing.
Star Wars, it was a lightsaber, really.
Yeah.
There you go. Super cauterized.
Yeah.
Overall, it's a pretty fun film, definitely. As I did say, that this, let's call it a loose plot, but it's still a plot. It does have a beginning, middle, and end, which is pretty fun. Trying to think of anything else I can say about the film, running through a brain skull face. In the end of it, it's just another movie. To him, I'm just filming a film. It's all in a film. It's all in your brain. It's okay. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that in there. It's how you take it. And I like to play off the psychiatrist. I have to go to a psychiatrist. All these horror movies just fuck me up. You know what I mean? And it's just a fun film. And it's definitely self-aware of what it's trying to be. It's basically Fulci having a fun time, self-masturbatory kind of a thing. Yeah. Boosted. And there was a big plot film that they boost to try to push some of his other films like Touch of Death, things like that. So it's definitely a fun film. I would watch a couple of other films first, maybe even Touch of Death, since you're going to watch it anyway while you watch this film. So I would watch some of his other films and then kind of bathe in the glory that's Fulci at the end. He can do no wrong in this film. As we see, he apparently goes into Sodoma's ghost mentality, assaults a camera, smashes it, and then almost rips all the clothes off a woman. He goes up and apologizes, and she's like, oh, it was beautiful. Oh. He does no wrong in this film. He is God in this film. I mean, women strip for him in the streets. People, he can wreck everything, and everyone's like, are you okay? Do you want $1? I'm fine with it. So, other than that, it's a fun film. I'll just stop talking about Cat in the Brain now, but it's a fun film.
But I'll have to ask both of you, do you fear hamburger and gardeners?
No, I would eat the tartar chaos. I would just eat the tartar chaos.
Because there's a lot of stuff here where it's sort of like comments on like the gore in his films where he seems like he's totally disturbed by the stuff he's done over his career. It's sort of built up to him. And it's like, I can't take it anymore. Also, there's a fun moment where he's watching the effects of an eyeball gag, which he's famous for. That's one of his biggest motifs, is the sort of sticking something in somebody's eyeball. That's happened in several of his films. And he's watching this not real enough.
Not real enough.
Got to do it over.
And there's a bowl of eyeballs there, if you know, and they go through and there's eyeballs everywhere. The one thing I will say that I forgot to mention, sorry about that, Lee, is the worst actor in the film is Fulci. Just I'll let you know that.
No, totally. He's definitely not an actor. He's done cameos before, but
I actually like his performance. I will defend it.
I'm not shitting on it. I'm just saying, definitely he's the worst actor in the entire film, but at the same time, I'm not saying he's crap.
He's not crap.
He's just the most unprofessional of all the actors.
He's used to being on the other side, so I can understand.
He's not. He doesn't give himself. There's not a wide range. It's really just kind of I walk around and kind of be pathetic in my sweater vest, and then I see something that's horrifying, and then I look horrified by it, and then I walk around somewhere in my swetter. I mean, it's like Mr. Rogers. I love the juxtaposition between how mild-mannered this guy is, and then just the sheer gore. And I will mention another effect as long as we're. I really love the shot of the torso that has had the head chopped off, leaning into frame and starting to spurt blood. Which
Yeah.
obviously Fulci liked it too because he used it like 8 times. So
Yeah.
Probably my most funny death is, I think it is also from Touch of Death, is when basically the guy just puts a girl's head in a box and shuts the lid, and her head falls off. That's all.
pretty much, yeah. And interesting enough, like speaking of like actors, like actor Brett Paisley said in an interview that he didn't even know he was in the film until quite some time after the film was released. Fulci had used clips of him from Touch of Death, of course, without ever notifying Paisley. So Paisley says he was kind of pissed off by Fulci, and Fulci had kind of a reputation of being like kind of a prick in a lot of productions. I mean, as beloved as he is, like he's kind of considered like the Italian George Romero to a certain degree, because he's got that sort of like friendly grandpa kind of like persona to him to a lot of people. But he was kind of a prick. Like he actually was kind of a asshole, kind of abusive prick on a lot of his sets. Apparently,
it's
anyway,
like Hitchcock, but you know.
Yeah, Hitchcock, but without the talent.
Right, and Hitchcock was scary, angry, scary.
So I gotta say, like, okay, so this film was also cut to death, like all pretty much Fulci's films. It was just chopped to shit. The German version of this film was 66 fucking minutes long. The full version is the version we all saw, was 93 minutes long. There's also an 87-minute version of this. For me, I feel like this kind of is a really good watch for people who are looking into Italian film history. This is sort of the quintessential look at where the Italian film industry had gone at that point. It basically shows that the film industry in Italy had not caught up to everyone else at this point. Yeah. Like if you look at this film, and I'm not trying to shell on this film, okay? It does not look like a film shot in 1990. It looks like a 1970.
I think that's the best part I like about it. That's my favorite part about the film.
Okay, well, the thing I gotta say though is like this looks like a film from the 1970s.
Yeah,
and
it does.
That's what hurts it in 1990. The Italian film industry for quite a while was very much it was contemporary with Hollywood films to a certain degree, and it was copying Hollywood films and recycling them and making a lot of money off them. This was sort of the dying era of Italian exploitation film. And you look at it, and you can kind of see, like, in 1990, this just really doesn't fucking cut it anymore. The budget really shows it. Like, the budget was $100,000, and that is actually, at that point, still pretty
very
big
low.
for...
Really? I thought it was very little. For $100,000.
For an Italian film?
Still, for an Italian film, yeah, never mind. Sorry, you can make 20 for those.
Yes, still kind of big for that sort of industry, and you kind of look at the quality of the film stock and everything like that. It really doesn't cut it for 1990.
Yeah,
I can understand why Fulci did not relaunch his career off this film, which he was trying to write.
I actually think the movie doesn't look terrible.
No, it doesn't.
I don't even think it looks that out of place for 1990, quite honestly, especially for low-budget films in 1990. We kind of think in terms of, like, I don't know, if you go and compare this to something like, Beverly Hills Cop, which was 87, or 84, I think. You compare it to something like that, it definitely looks a little bit like video. It looks a little bit kind of, not quite up to, like, cinematographic standards. The thing is that, like, now we think of stuff from 1990 and we think, like, oh, it's, what survived to this day. You know what I mean? As opposed to what stuff actually kind of looked like at that time. And there's always been this kind of thing of, like, Hollywood production values being much, much higher than... I think this doesn't look really any worse than, say, Maniac Cop, for instance. I think it fits in pretty well with something like that. Just to name something that we looked at recently that's made during that same time period. In fact, Maniac Cop's a few years later, and arguably should have higher production values. I think Maniac Cop does look better than this, but I don't think it looks like dramatically better. I think that really what we're talking about, I think when you say it doesn't look very good, I think it's really like Fulci was a filmmaker starting in like 59, really, and he's just making films in his old way. I would compare this to sort of like the later Woody Allen films, like the stuff like Small Town Crooks and that era of Woody Allen's career before he kind of started working with modern cinematographers again, when he was still making stuff that kind of looked like the stuff he made in the 70s and 80s, even though he was making it in the 21st century. It's not necessarily that the budget wasn't there, the technology wasn't there, it's just that Woody Allen's just kind of doing his thing the way he'd always done it. And I think this is Fulci just kind of doing this in the way he'd always done it.
I really like the vibe and the look of the film. I think that's what I like. That's what I look for in horror films, that kind of vibe, that feel, and the look of the film. I do enjoy that. It's just a little better for me than that. You could go out and get the VHS films, shot on VHS and stuff like that. This is what the nuance of the film I love when I watch Fulci films. It has that nuance, that look of it. Especially like if you watch new Dario Argento films and stuff like that, they look like shit compared to the stuff that he used to make back in the day. As far as the vibe and the film quality and stuff like that, I prefer the older stuff, but I'm a bitter old man. I will always be a bitter old man.
Well, once we get to Argento, I will have something to say about his later films, and I totally agree with you. But let me just say, I'm not trying to say that this film looks like shit, because I don't think it does.
No,
like I'm not against how this looks. I'm just saying that up to the standards of Hollywood contemporary stuff at this point, I think the Italian film industry had sort of seen its day, and it was in decline at this point.
Yeah, the day in the sun is over now.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it just was way behind what everyone was doing to a certain degree. I think that shows in this film. Like there just wasn't the money anymore. I think that's basically it. Like a lot of Italian exploitation films, they were getting tons of money. They were making tons of films throughout the 80s. Once they sort of hit like the late 80s to the 90s, that kind of dried up, and I think this is sort of indicative of that to a certain degree. That's why it's probably not as well known as it should be. Like, I actually kind of think this is a pretty good movie, honestly. Yeah. Especially because, again, I say it's a movie that incorporates a lot of like clip footage from other movies. And usually those movies are fucking terrible, like just unwatchable at all. This is actually watchable. It's interesting, especially if you're a Fulci film fanatic. You're a big fan of his. This is a lot of fun because it's very self-referential. A lot of in-jokes, a lot of sort of satire, and just, basically shitting on his critics, because he is a guy who hated his critics and was very vocal about how much he hated his critics. So he basically made a movie where he wanted to thumb his nose at his critics by basically putting everything in this fucking movie that his critics said he was and making fun of it. So to that degree, I think this movie is actually quite a bit of a success and a bit of an unknown gem to some degree. And I think it's actually worth seeing. But I would say this, watch his other films first before you get into this one. I mean, I would say go to Zombie, go to Black Cat, City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, of course, which I think is his masterpiece, which we will do at some point. If you're a big Fulci fan, this is definitely one to see and enjoy. So
I can give my final thoughts and a question. I got a question, too.
Okay.
Final thoughts. This is definitely a good film. I really like it. It reminds me of the newer film of My Name is Bruce, the self-aware, self-policing film that it is. You know what I mean? It's pretty damn fun. It's definitely a fun film, and it's built for the character to go to town on himself, and it's built for the fans to enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
Now, did you guys notice the maybe unintentional homage in the beginning of the film with Fulci's outfit? Because I think, in my own perspective, that's his own personal homage to Ed Gein.
With the plaid and the hat and stuff? Yeah.
That is exactly Ed Gein's outfit, and I'm wondering if he did that intentionally to do like a little mini homage to Ed Gein.
I was wondering why the fuck he was wearing that stuff, because I was would Fulci ever wear fucking plaid? Like, it just felt very out of place. It was wow.
If you looked at it, it was summer. It looked like hot out.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? You're wearing fucking plaid and a plaid hat to go with it. And that's exactly what Ed Gein was wearing when he was arrested.
Okay, so, that might very well, you might very well have caught on to something, because I hadn't thought about it, but it struck me as weird when I was watching the early on the films. Like, why is this like sort of dignified Italian horror director wearing that shit?
Yeah,
like,
and right at that point in the film, in the beginning, is when he was trying to eat the meat and stuff like that. If you know what I'm saying, like put it all together. So there you go. That's my little. Have you noticed that, or if you got what I'm saying? That was my question. Overall, the film, good film, definitely self-indulgent, and I think you should indulge yourself in it. definitely. There was another thought, but unfortunately that escaped my tiny little man brain.
So if we have nothing else to say about it, I'll just jump into Daniel. Tell us about your Doctor Who podcast.
Sure. You should, if you are interested in listening to me talk about stuff, or Doctor Who in particular, and leftist politics, which seems to be more and more what we talk about on my other podcast. I do a Doctor Who podcast called Always Spaceman, a Doctor Who love story. I do it with my wonderful wife. You can find that at alwaysspaceman.libsyn.com.
And Paul, where can we find you on the interwebs?
Oh, find me over at PA Brew News, one word, the YouTube channel all about beer, and then my YouTube channel about metal, Funeral Dust 666 on YouTube, and you can find me on Facebook at PA Brew News. Just like to throw a little thing in here because I don't know if I mentioned it yet. If you want to go see another awesome podcast about paranormal, weird stuff, conspiracies, the whole deal, go check out Project Archivist. So projectarchivist.com. I'm going to throw that in there too.
All right, you have to send me that link and I'll stick it on the old link list on our Podbean site.
Stick it in there.
Stick it right in. Deep, very deep. All right, so thank you very much, people, for listening. We're going to be back next week. What are we doing next week? Are we doing Argento, I think?
Argento, but I couldn't remember the other movie we were doing, so we'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's going to be 2 Argento films either way. So we'll be getting into Argento next week. I think Daniel will enjoy this much more than he enjoyed these 2 films.
I did like Cat in the Brain. We're doing Deep Red and Tenebrae next week.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Good.
Exactly.
I have the list because I don't remember them because I haven't seen them, so I have to keep the list.
Oh, Daniel's going to have a GL-ogasm next week.
Oh, yes, he will.
Are the GL-ogasms, do they look like raspberry jam coming out of my cock? Is that the way that works?
Only if you wear black gloves.
Yeah, only if you wear...
I do. I wear black gloves all the time. It's the thing.
Then you're good to go.
Yeah, you are set, sir. And I think we're going to go out. I forgot to mention with Host by the Cemetery, if anything, with Fulci Films, that has the best soundtrack out of any of his fucking films, I think.
Yeah,
and
he is really good with film.
Yeah, and we're going to go out on a piece from that film for our final song on this. And thank you very, very much for everyone for listening. Thank you, Daniel and Paul, and we're fucking signing out. Bye-bye.
Unpleasant dreams.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For our other episodes, links to Daniel, Paul, and Lee's other stuff, and links to some great podcasts of similar interest, visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can leave us comments on the site or directly email us. We listen and respond to everything. Thank you. Drive through.